So yesterday I did some recording about the Amir Khan Canelo fight, and we talked about the fight getting made. We talked about the weight difference. We talked about Kell Brook, Golovkin, all the side effects. And it occurred to me I didn't really do an in-depth breakdown stylistically of how I see the fight play out. Now, I've just watched Dwyer's video on Canelo versus Amir Khan, and Dwyer is one of my very, very favourite YouTube channels. I've been a fan of his for a very long time, well before I started doing this channel myself. And I've got a lot of time for his videos and a lot of respect for his opinions. But it is fair to say that historically he's not been the biggest fan of Canelo, and he is quite a big fan of Amir Khan. He fancied Canelo to lose to Miguel Cotto. I think he even scored the fight to Miguel Cotto potentially, whereas he's a big fan of Amir Khan, and I think he was picking Khan to beat Mayweather. Now, I've watched the video. It's funny, when he uploaded it, 3 or 4 different people actually sent it to me on Facebook and Twitter saying, check this out. And there seemed to be a bit of a surprise that Dwyer's actually gone out and picked Amir Khan to win in this fight. Now, I'm going to disagree with him here, and I'm going to go into it in some detail why, and talk about why I'm picking Canelo to win this fight. But first, let me say that something that I'm possibly guilty of at times, and I've certainly been guilty of in the past, it's a trap that us boxing fans and YouTube channel creators fall into, is I believe sometimes one of my weaknesses is that I overanalyze fights. I think of a few notable examples last year. Rocky Fielding versus Callum Smith, Alexander Povetkin versus Mike Perez. Both of those fights I got the predictions wrong. And both fights, not only did I get the predictions wrong, but humiliatingly, the guys that I picked were knocked out there instantly when the bell went. They both lost by first round knockouts. And for me, that kind of reinforces that boxing is a very, very brutal sport, which involves men who punch as hard can be, hitting another man on the chin and trying to render him unconscious. And that's why you can talk about all the variables you want in this game. You can talk about southpaw stances, you can talk about foot speed, you can talk about stamina. Sometimes in the fight game, due to the very nature of the sport, all of that stuff is made irrelevant, and no matter if you think that Rocky Fielding might out-jab Callum Smith, no matter if you think Mike Perez might have the movement to bother Alexander Povetkin, the fight gets changed in one round. Now Richard Dwyer, who, as I say, I'm a big fan of, I think has overanalyzed Canelo versus Khan. Now, he correctly points out several deficiencies in Canelo's game. It is true that Canelo is at his best when opponents come and meet him in the centre of the ring to fight him head on. It also is true that Canelo possibly doesn't have the most elite foot speed and fleet of foot around the ring that you're likely to see in professional boxing. I do agree with him on that. It's also true that Canelo has been treated favourably by judges at times during his career, which possibly makes his resume look better on paper than it actually is. I think Canelo deserves to be at the top in terms of the resume stakes. But, Dwyer makes a fair point. I mean, even if we put the Trout and Lara decisions to one side, and I understand those fights are controversial, even if we put the Cotto decision to one side, and again, I understand there's controversy there, there's no way that Canelo only drew with Mayweather. Mayweather pretty much won every round, and yet a judge scored that fight as a draw famously. What I'm getting at is the judges seem to be on Canelo's side, the public seem to be on Canelo's side, and time again he's won fights where the scoring was controversial, rightly or wrongly. He's done better in the feet against Floyd Mayweather than was anticipated. And I think Dwyer has got a point. He has got a point, and there are certain deficiencies in Canelo's game. He's not the complete fighter, and his resume perhaps flatters him ever so slightly. But I think this is where we come into questioning, is he overanalyzing this fight? because all of that is relevant. But will it be relevant in terms of him losing to Amir Khan? Now, Amir Khan is a very, very, very good offensive fighter. We've seen it time and time and time again. But despite all of Canelo's supposed deficiencies, let's look at what Canelo does bring to the table. First and foremost, he is a much bigger man than Amir Khan. Now, I'm not necessarily talking in height. Amir Khan may even be the taller guy, but I'm talking in terms of weight. Physically, if you just look at their physiques, you can see which one of these guys is possibly the more natural middleweight. When it comes to it, we expect Canelo Alvarez to be walking into the ring as a light heavyweight. Potentially, he'll even come into over the light heavyweight limit, over 175 pounds. So technically, potentially, Canelo will actually be a cruiserweight when it comes to fight night. Amir Khan, this is a guy who was fighting at light welterweight, 140 pound division relatively recently. So Canelo brings size. Secondly, Canelo brings power. Real power. I think Floyd Mayweather has described him as one of the hardest punchers he's ever been in with, and we've seen Canelo KO brutally at times guys in the light middleweight division, let alone guys in the welterweight division and light welterweight division. Canelo brings an excellent chin. Canelo is somebody with a real strong jaw. Look at Amir Khan. For me, his power hasn't translated to 147 in the same way he was hard hitting at 140. The knockouts have suddenly stopped at 147. He's gone the distance several times. So if Amir Khan's not knocking opponents out at 147, I personally view it as unlikely that he'll be knocking opponents out in the middleweight division at 155. So Canelo's got size, he's got power, he's got a chin. I also think he's an underrated boxer. Don't get me wrong, he's no Erislandy Lara in terms of the jab and move tactic. But I think sometimes people oversimplify what being a boxer actually means. You don't have to be an Austin Trout or a Erislandy Lara or a Rigondo to be classed as a good boxer. If I look at Canelo, I see good timing. I see a good boxing brain. I see good combinations. I see punch variety. I see the ability to choose the right punch at the right time. I see a guy who actually looks for gaps and counter punches. Personally, I see a guy who outboxed Miguel Cotto. Who found the right punch at the right time and was able to land with power and precision. As I say, Canelo's no Erislandy Lara, but he shouldn't be underrated as a boxer. Now, Amir Khan has certain advantages in this fight. Yes, he is going to have the advantage in foot speed. Yes, he is going to have the advantage in hand speed. And yes, again, he is going to have the advantage possibly in terms of the jab and throwing 1-2s from range. But the difficulty with Amir Khan is he's a fighter you can walk down. The Lamont Peterson fight is a famous example. The Chris Algieri fight is another famous example. Now, Dwyer seems to think that on these two occasions, Amir Khan lost concentration or was too egotistical and fought to someone else's style. I'm not sure I buy into that completely. I actually think Khan is a fighter who has focused on offense. He's built his career around going to war, being macho, having the big fights. I know he's with Virgil Hunter now, but historically he's trained with aggressive trainers like Freddie Rhodes. Amir Khan is a brave guy who comes to fight. I'm not sure he's the slickest defensive fighter. I'm not sure he's got the most educated defensive natural instincts. And I do think he has a tendency to get involved in unnecessary scraps. But most importantly, I do feel that you can close the ring down on Amir Khan. And you can put Amir Khan on his back foot in a way that maybe you can't do to an Erislandy Lara. And I think Canelo won't be left chasing Khan like he was left chasing Erislandy Lara at times when Canelo fought Lara. I think Canelo's going to be able to position Khan. I think Canelo's going to be able to push Khan back. And I think Canelo's going to be able to scrap with Khan. Now, Dwyer again gives the Danny Garcia fight as a real example as to why Khan can win this fight. And I understand that argument. But I actually take the Danny Garcia fight as a key piece of form on why Khan will lose this fight. For the exact same reason as Dwyer takes it. You know, Amir Khan was winning that fight with ease, yes. But then what happened? And we know that Canelo at 155 is going to be hitting a hell of a lot harder than Garcia at 140. The truth is, Khan can be 3 or 4 rounds up in this fight. Khan could start quickly and take an early lead. You know, it may take Canelo a little bit of time to figure Amir Khan out. But I think he's going to get caught. I think he's going to get walked down. And I think eventually Canelo will be able to close the ring. It may not happen in the first round. It may not happen in the second or third round. But I think it will happen after that, you know, in the rounds immediately following. Khan may have a lead here. But Canelo's going to keep coming. He's going to be ready for this. And Amir Khan's not going to be able to hurt him, for my money. If Lamont Peterson were able to position this guy up against the ropes, start hitting him to the body, start to put him on his back foot, I see Canelo Alvarez being able to do that. Now, a lot's made of Amir Khan having a bad chin. That's a secondary issue as I see it. The primary issue is that Amir Khan has a leaky defence. You know, you look at Amir Khan's fights, even if you look back at the Juan Diaz fight, or if you look at the Collazo fight, or if you look at the Maidana fight, let alone Peterson and Garcia, and, you know, Khan's defence is not watertight. So, we know there's a chin issue there. But let's put that to one side for 1 second. Even if Khan takes an early lead, do we really believe that Khan's got the defence to keep Canelo off him? And to keep Canelo away from his chin for 12 rounds? Can he run like Erislandy Lara run, scoring points off the back foot? For my money, Khan's just not that kind of fighter. He hasn't been throughout the course of his career. It's not in his instinct, it's not in his nature, and it's not what he's actually good at. You know, Khan is an offensively minded fighter, and for me to outpoint Canelo and to beat him by enough to win this fight, Khan's going to feel that he has to roll the dice a bit offensively. And for me, the difference here is, unlike in the Lamont Peterson, the second that Khan is pushed back on the ropes and his opponent is allowed to tear into him, is the second that this fight ends. You know, Canelo, legitimately, pound for pound, a top puncher. And a top puncher who's going to be in the 170s or 180s. Not a guy like Lamont Peterson, who weighed in the 140s when he fought Amir Khan. You know, my point is, let's not overcomplicate this. From my perspective, yeah, Dwyer makes fair points about Canelo's opposition, about Canelo's deficiencies, and he makes good points about Amir Khan's strengths. But what we're talking about here is an elite power-punching middleweight against a skilled, offensively minded welterweight with a defensive frailty and questionable punch resistance. I like Amir Khan. I'm a fan of Amir Khan. I'd love Amir Khan to win. I'd love to be wrong. But for me, this is a simple pick. Saul Canelo Alvarez by KO, mid-rounds. Let me know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this video, click the thumbs up. Please hit the subscribe button. I'll be covering this fight in detail before and make sure I speak about all the build-up.